Hello again. As you can see, I've been quite busy. I've made this boat, and I'll tell you a little while why I've made a boat. And at the end of it, you can watch a little video which will show you how you can make a boat like this. First of all, can you guess who this person might be? I'm going to put my boat to one side for the moment. So, any ideas who that might be? Did somebody say Jesus? Well, no, it isn't Jesus. Did somebody say Peter? No, it isn't Peter. That's right, I heard somebody say St Paul. That's who it was, that was St Paul. And it's very important to let you know a little bit more about St Paul, because we often talk about him in junior church, but I don't know whether you realise what an interesting chap he was. Now I say he was interesting because when he first heard about Jesus, he thought that Jesus was a troublemaker. He didn't like Jesus' message, and even worse than that, he would go around seeking out people who liked Jesus and liked his message, and he would have them arrested, sometimes even killed. So why do we think such a lot of St Paul when we look at the Bible and at the New Testament? Well, the reason is that one day Paul had a very dramatic change of heart. Something happened to him that made him think again, and instead of hating Jesus, he suddenly realised that the message that Jesus gave was a good one. And so he literally changed from being a horrible man who hunted followers of Jesus to becoming a follower of Jesus. And more than that, he knew that Jesus' message needed to go not just to the local area of Jerusalem and around Jerusalem. He knew that he had to take the message to other countries. And of course, the only way you could do that in those days was either a long walk or a ride on a horse, perhaps, or on a boat. Now, when we think about going to other countries on a boat, I think we probably imagine quite a big boat. But in actual fact, when Paul went on his journeys, he went in a boat a bit like this. Wrong picture. A bit like this, a fishing boat with a sail, but not terribly good for crossing heavy seas. He might have been lucky and gone aboard a cargo ship which was carrying goods to other countries, and that would be a bit bigger and a bit more stable. But Paul encountered lots of problems when he was out in his boats, and on one occasion he was even shipwrecked. Now, the other thing about Paul was, apart from being shipwrecked, he suffered an awful lot of other troubles, all because he was preaching the good news of Jesus Christ. He was beaten, he was stoned, where people pick up big rocks and throw them at you and cause horrible swellings and bruises and cuts. He was put in prison. He was ridiculed and made fun of. One day he even suffered a shipwreck and the results of an earthquake. I'll tell you about that one in a minute. But despite all that, Paul continued to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. And today I want to tell you how he took the good news by boat to a place in Greece called Philippi. And in the New Testament, we have some letters that Paul wrote to the church that he founded at Philippi. So what happened? Well, when he got to Philippi, which was in fact a city very much like Rome, where people kept slaves and people had a sort of order in which they lived. I'm better than him, I'm not as good as him, and he's not as good as the one up there. But the people at the bottom of this pecking order were treated very badly. And Paul was very anxious that the people in Philippi, the Philippians, he was very anxious that they learnt how to love one another and treat everybody equally. But when he was first in the city, because he started preaching about you shouldn't be unkind to your slaves, you shouldn't treat people worse than you are, he caused an awful lot of trouble because the people who owned the slaves wanted to keep their slaves and they wanted to make them work hard for them. And the result was that people started rioting, people started protesting about Paul. And after a while, Paul was arrested, he was beaten, he was flogged, all things that were very harmful, very painful. And on top of that, they threw him and his companion, Silas, into a prison. Now, we think that the prison probably looked something like this. Can you see? A stone building with a gate. Not very luxurious. It would have been very hot during the day and very cold at night. But Paul and Silas knew that they'd got to keep their spirits up. And so during the long night, when it was very cold and all the prisoners were all huddled together inside this tiny little prison, Paul and Silas started to pray. They prayed, of course, to God about Jesus Christ. And then they sang some hymns. And after a little while, the other prisoners, they'd stopped to listen. And after a little while, the other prisoners joined in as well. And soon the jailer, who was outside the gate, could hear prayers and hymns. He wasn't quite sure what it was all about. Well then, suddenly, the ground began to shake. And one or two of the bricks or the stones in the prison worked loose. And after a while, this sound and the noise, which they understood was an earthquake, got so violent that the stones started to fall apart. The gate fell off. They could have escaped. Now, the jailer, as soon as he realised what had happened, he drew his sword, not to get at the prisoners, but he was about to kill himself. And the reason for this was that if he allowed the prisoners to escape, he would be in such trouble that he'd rather be dead. But just as he was about to use his sword, Paul called out, "Don't, stop, don't worry, we're all here. We haven't escaped." The jailer couldn't believe it. What prisoners would not use that opportunity to escape? Well, the jailer then wanted to know, of course, what was it about Paul and Silas that had changed them and that had changed the other prisoners? And so Paul told the jailer all about the wonderful things that Jesus had done and the wonderful things that Jesus had said. And before very long, the jailer too became a follower of Christ. Well, Paul faced other hardships as he journeyed through to other countries, but while he was in Rome, the big city of Rome, he was thrown into prison again. And I don't know if you can remember, a while back in junior church, we made some paper chains and we chained each other up, and we tried, while we were chained up, to write, not with a nice pencil or a pen, but with just an old stick. And I don't know if you remember that we pretended that we were writing a letter from prison, just like Paul. And this was what Paul did while he was in Rome. He knew that the church at Philippi that he'd set up while he was over there were having a few problems. They were forgetting what Paul had said about being nice to each other. They were being very hard on some of their slaves. They weren't treating each other very well. So Paul got out his writing thing, and he got some parchment and he started to write. Remember, chained up, and he started to write. And it went on a scroll which was then sent to the people of Philippi. Now, what he actually said was, apart from lots of other things, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But in humility, regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you not look to your own interests, but to the interests of others. So basically what Paul is saying in this message is, instead of looking at other people and thinking, oh, they're a bit, look down on them, they're not very special at all. Instead of doing that and thinking they were better, they should look at other people and think they are really good people. They're kind people. And I should not look down on them, but I should respect them and love them. And Paul is saying to the Philippians, don't do anything just to promote yourself, to make yourself look better. Do things to make other people look better and to feel better. And we can all do that, can't we? By saying a kind word to somebody, or by telling somebody that they're looking very nice today, or that you like what they're making or what they're doing, instead of criticising and moaning and thinking we're so much better than them. So that was Paul's message to the Philippians. So despite the fact that they'd put him in prison, despite the fact that they'd beaten him and flogged him and done terrible things to him, he still showed the kind of love that Jesus had shown to him and to others and to all of us. Now, that wasn't the only time Paul went in a boat. He made a lot of journeys in a boat. And as I said, in a little while you'll be able to watch a video of how to make a boat, a bit like Paul's. Well, bye for now, and see you again soon, I hope. Bye-bye.